4 years of the business, panels alone, not only that, but career conversations about the shows, the whole 9 yards. Our goal is to every actor to know about the foundation. So if you cannot financially give, which we know most of you maybe don't have the means to do that, you can share. Please tell everyone, please share the videos, please retweet us, and that will help us get the word out so actors like you can use the free services. Make sense? So that you can do that for us? Awesome. Thanks, guys. I'm excited for tonight. I assume we have some Mad Men fans in the house. Yeah, so. Debra Birnbaum is the executive director of TV at Variety. She's going to take us through this evening and kind of give us the Q&A to set this up. So give her a hand and give the cast director time as they come on up.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. And it's my pleasure to welcome. I just wanted to see what order you were sitting next to me. You both have curly hair. It's a pleasure to sit next to curly girls in LA. Exactly. I've got Carrie, Audino, and Schiff with me, the casting directors for Mad Men. So when Dennis asked me to moderate this panel, I think I wrote back in all caps, within probably 15 seconds, absolutely. I don't think I've ever been so excited to moderate a panel and been such a huge fan of a show. I think the show has been, as you guys probably know, has been pretty iconic, and to say goodbye to it has been pretty, I don't know, emotional for me. How has it been for you? How are you feeling about the finale now that the world has seeded?
Emotional is a good word. I mean, we said goodbye last May.
Over and over and over again.
So, and it's a group of people that likes to be together and party, and there's a lot of events. So we've seen each other a lot since then, and we've said goodbye a million times. But the finale last week was more emotional, I think, than I was expecting.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It snuck up on me.
Yeah.
And how was it, we did that big panel last week with the entire cast and the entire crew, and then the big screening party. What was that experience like for you guys on your side of it?
I mean, it was amazing to see everybody all together because we've seen them individually here and there over time. To see it with an audience was amazing. You don't get that opportunity very often, and to see what the audience reacted to, and it's different than what you react to yourself at home watching your TV. And
There was a lot of cheering.
Yeah.
A lot.
And gasps. And that was cool to see how, I think that was like 1,600 or 1,700 people. And it was like everyone together, and 200 of them knew what was going to happen, because they were, or maybe not 200, 100. But then everybody else, it was fresh for them. So it was pretty cool.
And you guys have been in on the secrets for so early on, just as casting directors, knowing what was coming. So you knew that the world was going to know that Don was buying the world a Coke.
Yes.
Yes.
That was not the hardest secret to keep. For me, Peggy and Stan was the hardest secret to keep.
Wow.
Really?
It really was. Because people would talk about it. They'd be like, I hope they get together. Oh, my God. And I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. I would love that.
For me, it was actually Betty. Betty
was hard.
Not that anyone would ask questions like that, but people would say things to me like, well, they can't all have happy endings. And you'd start
You were just like...
How's your poker face?
Well, people were like, Don and Betty get back together. I'm like, no, they don't. That's not what happens.
Yeah, no.
Was there anything about the finale that surprised you guys?
I mean, we
You
had...
mean on reading it?
Yes,
like when
I'm being told it. Yeah.
No, I mean, there's such a method to Matt's madness that I think, he says this is what it's gonna be, and you're like, wow. And you kind of don't have all the details he has, even when you read it. And then to see it sort of come alive was pretty exciting.
Whenever I read a Mad Men script, it was like, it was all surprising, and yet none of it was surprising.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's because it's amazing what they would come up with and what Matt would do with the characters, but yet after you read it, you would say, of course.
Talk about it from a casting perspective. I'm especially interested in casting Leonard, because I think that role was so pivotal to everything that happened in the finale. You had that actor really had to sell that part.
Well, that was kind of amazing because Matt, when we read the script, Matt said to us, this speech is what the entire show is about.
No pressure.
No, exactly. And I said to Carrie once the door was closed, I said, this is the hardest part we will ever have to cast, because Matt has built it up so much in his head and has so much expectations for it that he will never be satisfied with anyone. And at the time, Matt was directing the penultimate episode, so we had to do all of our casting in the evening and on the weekend, because Matt comes to all sessions and he couldn't come during the day. He was directing. So we did a Saturday morning session, and Evan Arnold came in early because he had something to do with his kids that day. So he showed up early and was the first person signed in. And he came in and he did it once and he wept. And
We all wept.
we all wept. And Matt kind of was flabbergasted and didn't even ask him to do it again, which is very, very unusual. And Evan left, and Matt said, "Now, was that so hard?" Because he knew how we felt about the role and that it was going to be that hard. And it was just, Evan came in and just did it. It was exactly what Matt wanted.
He had done that to us on other roles, too. I mean, none as pivotal as that, but some of them, I mean, you know, casting Megan Draper and, you know, Jessica Perret, and there was a few roles where it was like, oh, that's tall order. Okay.
So talk about casting Megan. What was that experience like?
I mean, he was like, it's Don's new wife, so figure that out. And I was like, okay.
Did he give you any help, any hints?
I mean, Don's got a type, so we started there. But he wanted her to feel like someone that we'd never seen on the show before. And I think she did. Mm-hmm. She had a totally different vibe, and the way she moved through the world was like no other woman on the show. So that, and especially, and she's got such an interesting look, and she's so beautiful in traditional and non-traditional ways. And I think that she was honestly a perfect fit. And I think we both knew kind of early on he was going to end up casting her, even though we saw a million people.
Yeah, we saw her in the first session and
Yeah.
then came back around because it was such an important role that there was a lot of time needed to make that decision. And there was no material.
Yeah. And he's writing often. Like, casting sessions for him he's rewriting the script, he's thinking about a million things. So sometimes we're helping him through that process.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes he's trying to figure out if the scene works or not, and trying to figure out what he's going to change about it, and the actors can help him with that.
I'm fascinated with the idea of casting without any material. So what are you casting based on?
That was infrequent, but we would use old material from other roles.
I think we used Jane Siegel stuff, which was actually not good,
which I complained.
not appropriate at the
No,
time.
I complained super loudly about that. I was like, this is going to make us see a lot more people than we need to.
Right, but you know, Megan was supposed to be in episode 1 of that season, just sitting at the reception desk with no lines, and we were supposed to pan across her and think, who's that? But we ended up not even doing that because Matt wanted to spend more time making a decision.
Right.
But even in the episode she did first appear, and she only had one line, and scripts were not written well enough in advance to know that, like, in episode, 4 or 5, she was finally going to have a real scene. So we had to figure out what to use instead of real material.
And I mean, the agents couldn't see anything. She couldn't see anything. We basically just had to say, trust us. It's awesome.
Right. Yeah, it's a great part. We don't know, we can't tell you anything about it, but it's a great part.
And he was like, really? I'm like, you've known me a long time. Really. Promise.
But that was the case on every role. It
A lot
wasn't
of them,
not just on Megan Draper. Even if we knew what the role was or had sides, the sides were changed, the sides were different.
It was obscured. Yeah.
Wow. I want to take you back to the beginning because I know you didn't cast the pilot, but then you came on to the show. What was that experience like?
I mean, we didn't really know what we were getting into. We just knew it was really good.
Yeah, I remember it was Christmas time, and we got sent a disc from AMC, and it came to my house because Carrie was out of town. And the day she was getting back, I left it at her house. I watched it the day before or something, and I said, you know, I'm leaving this at your house. Watch it. I don't know if anyone's ever going to watch this, but we have to do it. which is, of course, you know, at the time AMC didn't have any shows, no one watched it, it wasn't on the map. And it was a period piece, and it was not, you know.
I mean, there were actors in it that we knew because we're casting directors, but not a traditional cast by any means.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I remember watching it going, oh yeah.
And the
It
scenes
was
were
so
super
special.
long, and
Yeah.
you know, it was very different from other things on TV. But we just thought it was amazing right from the start, and wanted to do it.
Yep. And then he took 4 months to decide to hire us. So
Right. Yes. Well, we met with him. The reason we met with him at Christmas time was because he was. Actually, I only met with him because you were still out of town, or something.
No.
Because he was
He wasn't-
here on a break from Sopranos. He was still shooting Sopranos. So then he went back and finished Sopranos, and then met with us after, or you know,
Something.
I don't remember exactly.
yeah.
But it was
It took
was
a while.
long process.
It was.
And every month or so, I would be like, maybe I should check in with Scott Hornbacher again and see if they've made a decision on that, and volunteer to do some extra free work in the meantime. Oh, if you need anything, I know you guys are New York based, so if there's anything you need help with here, just let me know.
We don't offer to do that very much.
No, never.
So we wanted that job.
Yeah.
How did you build a relationship where you had trust with Matt? Because obviously this was such an important part of what the show would become.
We disagreed in front of him.
A lot and vehemently. Matt always says that that's the moment that he knew that he could really trust us, was we saw an actor for a role, and I said, I love her, and Carrie said, I hate her. And that's when he knew that we were not gaming the system, we were not trying to talk him into something, we were not. And I mean, generally when two casting directors disagree in front of the showrunners, that means nobody's getting cast.
Right.
You know, if you're both staking your claim, they're going to look for someone who you both love. And
You got to play to your crowd. You know, there's some people you can do that with and some you can't. Matt likes that. And there's other people we work with that would be very unnerved by us
Right.
disagreeing.
But he liked
So-
it because he really knew that we were honest with him.
We weren't trying to work him into just getting it cast. It's sort of not how we do it. So
Right.
Well, who were one of the first people that you cast for the show?
Robert Morris.
Kieran and Shipka.
Yeah.
What did you, I mean, the casting of Kiernan Shipka to me is one of those just sort of great finds of this show. What was it about Kiernan that appealed to you? What did you see in her?
She was so precocious and so smart. She was 6.
No, it's amazing.
It's
I mean,
crazy.
I went back and watched all the old episodes to prepare for last week's panel, and just watching her running around with that plastic bag around her head. I mean, as shocking as that scene was, but knowing what the actress that she would become and what she had in her, it's amazing.
Yeah. You never know with kids. You know, she's incredibly talented, but we also got lucky. You know, when they're little, they're not fully formed, and you hope that they'll grow into these incredible actors.
And I think we
she
put
did.
her into a situation where she could become
Yes.
that actress. She was working with great actors and with really good material and with a showrunner who was patient and supportive and didn't just want to get there quick, he wanted to get there right. And that all helps and fostered her talent.
She really grew up on that set.
Yeah, she really
Definitely.
did. I mean, she's, as John Hamm likes to say, she's been on the show longer than she hasn't been on the show in her life. He says it better, but you know.
You did a pretty good
Only
job.
because he looks like John Hamm.
Everything he says is pretty good just because he looks like John.
It's
Hamm.
totally true.
true.
Gets away with a lot.
And then talk about Robert Morse.
Well, Matt kind of wanted to go back and wanted to think about who hadn't been seen in a long time. Matt was had a very strong feeling from the beginning that one of the reasons the pilot worked so well is because you didn't know all of these actors and they didn't take you out of it because you didn't say, oh, there's so-and-so playing, you know, a part in the 60s. So he didn't want the usual suspects for, you know, this time. And so we started looking back, like, who hasn't been seen in a long time? And I think and he made Robert come in to read. Because everyone came in to read on that show. Every single person who was ever on it read for the show.
Yep.
And but I think also when you're talking about someone of that age, you want to see what are they like now, you know. And
he
Robert was
really-
amazing.
And he really was of that era, you know. He really was famous when we were doing, you know, like specifically in the period we were talking about. So it was a good throwback as well as being great for it.
He's amazing.
He
He
is.
was, and when he sang and danced at the end.
Oh my
I
God.
know.
Also emotional.
Also
Very,
emotional.
very emotional.
Talk about that process of making everybody come in and read. Was that a rule that was hard and fast and set from the beginning?
Yep.
From the beginning, even before anyone had seen the show and people loved the show. Season 1, we're telling people, sorry, everyone has to come in and read, and we're being told, what? And people would pass. People would say, no thanks, my client doesn't have to come in and read for this show. And then we premiered, and
And we won a couple awards.
And
then
then-
people wanted to come in.
right. And then 2 seasons later, those very same actors would be happy to come in to read for anything.
Yes.
I'm sure.
I mean, it's crazy, the actors' response to the show. You know, super famous actors, where you go to these parties and the Emmy things, and, you know, you got Mark Ruffalo being like, I'll do anything. And I'm like, okay, okay, buddy, great.
I once
We'll talk to Matt about it.
Yeah, I once got a call from Tony Sepulveda, and I knew he was in New York, and it was 11:30 my time, so it was like almost 2 a.m. his time, and he's calling me on my cell, and I pick it up, and he's in a bar, and he's telling me he's there to see shows, and he's there with actors afterwards, and he's like, here, I have someone who wants to talk to you. She wants to tell you why she wants to be on the show. And it was Scarlett Johansson. You know?
It was crazy. It
Amazing.
was fun.
Yeah, and I had to tell her she's too famous.
Yeah. I told Mark that. He was like, that's dumb. He's like, no, I'm not. I was like, kind of.
And I mean, I guess you've already talked about this, but that was, again, another rule that you had, that you just didn't want famous people on the show.
We didn't want us to pull it out. We didn't want it to be distracting. You don't want to get pulled out of the period and out of the story because someone you identify with, you know, being on Friends or something, you know, is like there. So it's like we had to be careful of it.
But at the same time, we would argue with Matt, because Matt would say someone was too famous, and we would say, are they supposed to never work again? Because, you know, it would be someone who was identified with a show that had been on a bunch of years ago, and it was, you know, a very specific, literally it could have been a kid's show that his kids watched when they were young, and he would say that person's too famous. So we had to fight with him about that a little bit, and we found a happy medium.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just say, okay, too famous.
I like the too famous, not too famous line. Because you did eventually cast some recognizable actors.
Definitely. They were right for the parts. I stand by that. They really were. I don't feel like we did it for famous sake.
No.
No, sometimes we did it to spite the famous,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, I sort of like the surprise of it, of, you know, seeing a Harry Hamlin totally reinvent himself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Harry was great. And Matt was a big LA Law fan. So that was a slam dunk.
Yeah. There was a lot of people, you know, Matt talks about years when he didn't work and watched a lot of TV. And those were, you know, some of those years were...
Those were some of his favorite actors. So you could sprinkle a few of them into sessions, and I was like, we're probably going to cast Harry Hamlin.
But that was good. We were good with that.
We were, yeah.
What made a perfect Mad Men actor? Is there a perfect formula for one? Was there?
I mean, he really gravitated towards funny people. And I don't know that there was a formula, but I mean, good actors. Good actors, funny actors. Grounded. No obvious plastic surgery. I'm sure people made it on that had it, but it was good.
Just going back to Don's type for a second, I loved it last week when Matt was like, Don didn't have a type, and you clearly said, oh yeah, Don had a type. Clearly it was about the brunettes.
He liked brunettes, yeah.
Except for Betty.
Except for Betty. And Dr. Faye?
Well,
She was a brunette.
No,
Yeah.
but not as tight. So there was just that endless rotation. So were you aware of that when you were casting for Don's Women?
Not initially.
right.
Yeah, as we went through many women, we started to see a trend.
So was that something Matt was responding to, or something that was happening as as women were coming in?
I think both, a little of both.
Yeah.
Can you talk about Matt's involvement in the process? What was it like working with him?
I mean,
Well,
deeply involved.
unlike every other TV show in town, Matt was in every session, from the biggest recurring parts to the roles that had one line. Matt was there. He saw every actor. There was one session we had in like maybe season 4, and it was for a kid who had maybe a few lines, and he had been up all night writing, and he said, I have to sleep. And we said, we'll put it on tape for you. And it's the only time it ever happened. And it was, we were reading one role, and that was it. But other than that, he sat in every audition and gave every actor pretty much a note. I mean, I remember when Kevin Rahm came in to read, and he was way backed up in the hall. We had, as usual, because Matt worked with people so much, so people would have to wait. And Kevin
It didn't
came
matter
in.
how much we spaced it. It didn't matter. Like, we tried to allow for it to not have people waiting, and
Yeah.
people waited.
And Kevin came in, and he did it once. And that was also a big role. This was Don's nemesis. And he read once, and Matt said, great, thanks so much. And I was like, how could Matt have hated him? He was great. And he left, and Matt's like, I love that guy. He's amazing. Wow. And I was like, I'd never seen him not give a note.
It was very rare.
But it was very unusual.
How does that compare to other shows that you've worked on?
I mean, there's shows where we don't even see the producers.
Wow.
We see them when they hire us.
And then there's everything in between.
Yeah. They come for big recurrings or series regulars, and
Or they come when they can, or they send someone, one of the other writers or something like that. But Matt is by far the most involved we've ever worked for.
for sure.
How did he have the time for all of that? It was just
It was stressful for him. It was a lot, for sure. He was way overcommitted.
I
And
think
in the best way, but it was part of his process. I think the casting process was a valuable creative tool for him. So I think that he wanted to be there. It was never really a chore, which makes a huge difference, I think.
We had a great time in that room every week. And I mean, I think if he had to do more than 13 episodes a season, it might have killed him. I mean, doing 22 like that, you just can't.
Of course.
And that's part of the difference. When you're working on a network show where you're doing 22 episodes a year, they can't come and do that. But 13, he basically just wore himself to the bone for, 6-8 months, and then, or more really, with post and with writing and everything. And then he would recharge for a couple months and come back and do it all over again.
amazing.
It was amazing.
Did you learn anything from working with him?
Yeah. I mean, so much.
So much. It's like hard to even figure out like where we were 8 years ago. And I think I don't know, we definitely learned a lot. We learned a lot about him. We learned a lot about us. We learned a lot about actors. I mean, it was just interesting to see how they reacted to him, how he reacted to them. And, I always say that a big part of our job is, do I buy it? Someone comes in and they do something, and does it ring true? And that was always what Matt was looking for. And I think we took that to a new level with him.
Definitely. And I mean, he was so collaborative with everything that he wanted to ask you questions about props, and he wanted to ask you about stuff that had nothing to do with what you do. So you started to be part of the process in a way that you're not on other shows. And we ended up learning a lot. I mean, we knew, casting is around the showrunners more than most departments. But on this one, we really were involved in a lot of other things where he was having trouble making a decision for whatever reason. And he'd be like, can you look at these costume choices? And I was like, okay. I'd be happy to. So, yeah, I mean, it was a humongous learning opportunity. Learning to produce and things like that.
Was there one role that was particularly difficult to cast?
I'm like, all of them.
No, they weren't.
No, they weren't all.
I mean, Megan Draper certainly springs to mind.
Abigail Spencer was hard too, that role. Suzanne. We saw a lot of people for that.
Yeah.
The ladies were hard. Like those big love affair ladies were hard.
Yeah, I guess
He had
that's
something
true.
very specific in mind. The only one that wasn't hard was Linda Cardellini. We only saw 2 people for that.
Yeah, which was super unusual.
Super
for
unusual,
us.
but they were 2 really pretty famous people
Right, and special people.
and special. And I think he already knew he wanted Linda. Part of him did.
What was it about Linda?
I think she was earthy, really earthy, but sexy, and I think that character needed that. She was so transformed. It's crazy to look at Linda Cardellini on Mad Men. I mean, she looks.
And it was
Like,
amazing. I mean, I just
totally.
remember when that episode aired, and everyone was like, "Who is that? Could that really be Linda Cardellini?"
I know. It's crazy.
Actually, casting her husband was really hard.
That was really hard.
That was really hard. And Matt's dad is a doctor, and of that era, and Matt has several other doctors in his family. And he has a very specific. Actually, doctors were always hard with Matt. We should never do a medical show with him.
I honestly don't think that we're going
No,
to.
I don't think so. I don't think
I
there's
just
much
don't-
I don't
worry.
think Matt has a medical show in
I
him.
just don't think it's his next piece.
I don't think there's much worry, but if
No.
it ever happens,
You've heard
but
it here first.
he has a very, very specific idea about doctors, and this was a doctor who Don was going to sleep with his wife, and they were going to be neighbors.
But it
and
was like a rock star doctor. and
Right.
It was like he was super confident, and yeah, it was hard.
And that was really hard. And we thought of Brian, and at some point in the process, and Brian was in Vancouver, and everyone reads on Mad Men. So that was hard, and we eventually did a Skype audition, which we did maybe 3 or 4 times
Yeah.
in all of Mad Men. And Matt worked with him via Skype for a while. We're all like gathered around a little computer, and it was amazing. And I love Brian, and it worked out perfectly. But that was late in the process after we had seen a lot of actors in LA, and
Yeah.
Matt wasn't seeing what he wanted and we thought of Brian,
Yeah.
and he happened to not be here. So
The audition process on that show, I mean, I was just thinking about, like, he gave us notes
oh yeah,
all the time.
on how to read with them.
Yeah. And Laura and I almost do all the reading. You know, we don't have a reader come in, so it's either one of us reading with. And on Mad Men, honestly, Matt had, he had specific roles that he liked for me to read, specific roles he liked Laura to read.
He liked,
was a
he
whole
liked
thing.
my Betty, and he liked her Dawn.
I read Don almost always.
Right.
You did good Peggy, too.
Oh, I did
Yeah.
get Peggy. Yeah. Generally, he liked me to read the girl.
And I read Joan.
Yes, that's true. It didn't, once we were doing a session where one of us started, we just did everything, but
Yeah.
but definitely
But
there
he
were
had preferences, yes, and we got notes. I remember, I'll never forget, it was season 1 when Betty sees a psychiatrist, and we were casting Andy, it was Andy Umberger, and I was reading, and he said, "You know what, I need you to turn around, like you're on a therapist's couch." And I was like,
Don't face the actor.
and I was like, "I can't see the actors." And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like,
but that's my job.
And I was like, I can't help you choose. I can't help you. I'm just going to be having my back to them. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. I did it. It was fine. Hey, it was, I mean, if Laura hadn't been there, I'd have been like, I don't know. We can't help you.
Yeah. Did it work?
Yeah. It helped Matt. So,
That's
great.
all that matters.
Great.
Whatever it takes.
Totally.
Talk about casting Bruce Greenwood to play.
That was hard.
Yeah, that was hard.
I would imagine finding someone that would keep up with Joan.
Hard. And he wanted him really, it was very important that he was a certain age. And that was one of the biggest challenges, is because sexy had to be on the table. There was a whole list of things.
It needed to be someone that you were going to root for Joan to be with.
Yeah.
But someone of a certain age and who, you know, a lot of kind of specific characteristics, but also just this innate desire for the audience to want to see them together. And that's a hard thing to find. So in such a short period of time, you know, you needed to establish that very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we have 8 days. It's not even,
But
sometimes less.
I even mean in the
Yeah.
episodes.
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
no,
there's only a
establishing
couple
them,
of
yes.
episodes where from the moment they meet to the end, and so you really needed to want them to be together from the moment you saw him.
What was it about him?
He has a ton of charisma, Bruce. And a lot of personality, not just charisma, but
And strength.
Yeah.
You know, it felt like he could stand on his own with her and let her stand on her own, but also take care of her. You know, I think so that all of those conflicting emotions for what we want for Joan all play out through him.
And then I promise I won't keep asking about individual actors, but last one, Elizabeth Reeser, because again, she fits into that type.
yep.
You called that right from like months before we had to cast it.
I know. Well, we had talked about it over the summer, and I just started, I don't know, I started thinking about it, and I was like, you know, it'd be great. And I just said to him, Elizabeth Reeser, and he was like, oh, I like her. And and then we talked about it for a couple months, but then, you know, there was no material, and he didn't know,
And there were other actors
There were
who
other
came
people,
in,
yeah.
but it all.
But
it
she was
came
one of
back.
those people that we talked about early on. Sort of like Julia Ormond, too. Was like
Oh,
that.
well, Julia Ormond, I think we talked about for a year before
Yeah.
before the character even
And
appeared.
she really wanted to be on the show. She was one of those people that was like, I'll do anything.
Right. Eddie, I remember one year at the SAG Awards, like
She
just
was
it
very
was-
excited
Yeah.
to be on the show.
Yeah, exactly. and when we knew we were going to eventually need Megan's mother, it seemed obvious.
Yes.
So,
He didn't write roles necessarily for people, but he just sort of kept people in the back of his mind.
yeah.
Yep.
He never wrote to people. Once someone was cast in a role, he added layers based on who they were. I mean in subsequent episodes, like Megan Draper was not supposed to be French Canadian at the beginning, but once Jessica was cast, then that was an element that was brought in and that he layered in, and then eventually we had to cast her mother and her sister, and it that made raised the bar for challenging casting. That was hard. Casting Megan's sister, that was hard.
That was hard.
Were any easy? Yeah, I keep.
But they were, I mean,
They
some
were
of them-
hard, but a pleasure.
Like some of them were easy, you know, some of them were, but there was a lot of detail to the casting we did on that show.
It's by far the most specific work we've ever done.
For sure.
You do work on so many shows where you ask the producer, the writer, the director, what are you looking for here? And they either don't know or can't communicate it to you.
Or they'll be like, you know, 35 to 40.
Yeah, it's very and then some of those producers are actually open to anything, and when they see something in the room, they say that's it. Some of them, you bring people in and they say, oh, I should have told you that they really need to be this or they really need to be that, and then you have to start all over again. But with Matt, he was specific in the script. He was specific in our concept meeting. Sometimes we had to push him to be specific, but he would be, and he really had something very specific in his mind. And
Always.
we just had to look to how to
Sometimes
fulfill
it was
that.
so specific that we were like, yeah, that's crazy. There's 4 actors that look like that. So,
And sometimes we would say, you know, can you be more specific and tell us what this person is like? And he'd be like, blonde, doughy, and we're like, no, not physically. What are they like? You know, and we wanted
What
to get
kind of person are
inside.
they?
Yeah, and then he would switch gears and go there.
Is there a specific moment you're proudest of?
Oh my God. Jared Harris was pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are just so many.
Yeah, I feel like I'm proud of the whole show.
I mean, Freddie Rumsen.
Oh my
God. I mean, that was one that Matt had actually written the part with someone in mind, and then that didn't work out, which he almost never does. And then we were looking for someone who could fulfill Matt's impression of that person, which actually didn't exist anymore. It was someone who had changed over time. And I literally one day in the shower said out loud, Joel Murray. And we brought him in and he booked the part. But we were struggling with that part. And I just think Joel was amazing on the show throughout and grew so much as a character over the years.
So cool.
But that's just my own personal little...
What, as people came into audition, what would make someone stand out? What made you say this is the right person for this part? Or did it depend on the role?
It depended on the role. People that were off book, it was super helpful on that show. And we always tell people they don't need to be, but on Mad Men it was helpful because he worked with them so much.
Right, and he worked with them so much that if they didn't know the material really well, they couldn't keep up with the note. They couldn't make the adjustment in the same way so that was really a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other show, I think, that I ever told actors that they needed to be off book. It was like, be familiar with the material. Certainly know what you're doing, but it's okay. But on Mad Men, I was like, if you can memorize it, you should. Because it helped. It really did, because he was almost always going to give you a note.
Right, and I think a lot of times actors read material and they're used to making their own interpretation of what's there, and of course that's what they need to do. But Matt's language is so specific, and even his punctuation is so specific that you can't just use it as a suggestion. You have to kind of parse the words.
You definitely can't add to the material. That's a problem.
Right,
That
but
was a big
I mean, there were
problem
times
on that
where
show.
I'm literally thinking, that's a period, not a question. Or that's a question, not a period. Because that would make a big difference to understanding what the material was about.
And not to say, it was hard for the actors. It was all obscured. They had no idea who they were talking to. They had no idea where it fit in the story. So
Who the scene was with.
it was
any of
awful. So we recognized that we were creating a situation that was extraordinarily challenging.
And we would constantly remind Matt of that after the actors
He's like, how come we
left.
didn't understand it? I'm like, I don't understand it. Like, what scene is this? So it was hard.
And
Like,
we would do that all the time. We would actually get in the room, pick up the sides, and I would look at them, and I wouldn't know who.
they were insane. Some of the sides were insane.
I would literally have to open my script next to it to be able to map this role onto, this obscured character onto this other, who the actual character was with, the scene was with. And that made it impossible. And we would constantly remind Matt of that.
And he would be like, right. Like, he understood once we reminded him.
Right.
It was hard. We've used that word so much, and I don't think about the show that way. You know what I mean?
Not at all. I mean,
Not
it's
at all.
literally the best job we've ever had.
Oh my God! Yeah,
Of course.
it's amazing. But it was like, when you get into the nuts and bolts of what we did on that show, it's
But the reason we loved it was because it was so hard. You go to
sure.
you work on so many shows where they're not looking for perfect. They're looking for the best person they saw that day.
Yeah.
They don't want to have another session.
They're like, get me a judge.
They don't want to
He should be
dig any
judgy.
deeper. And we want the perfect person, and Matt wanted the perfect person. So we were a great match.
for sure.
And that's what made the show so special ultimately, because everything about it was that attention to detail at every level, from casting to props to costumes to, hair and makeup. I mean, I think if it wasn't that, it wouldn't have been Mad Men, ultimately.
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Can you talk, without naming names, about near misses, someone who came in and just botched an audition?
I mean, All the time. I mean, that's part of, we can't, without naming
Just tell a
names.
story.
That's not a fun story, without the names.
All right.
I mean, these guys don't want to hear about the torture of some other human, some other
But
poor actor.
I mean, but the funny thing is that some of the best stories are the ones of like actors who botched it and were able to bring it back from the brink.
Yes.
Right?
I wish we could say, he wouldn't care if we said his name.
He wouldn't. Go ahead.
All right, so Charlie Hoffheimer, who played Abe, Peggy's boyfriend, I mean, he lost his mind in his audition. Like
It was like- there
he
was like
falling
flop
apart,
sweat.
flop sweat, falling apart at the seams. I was reading with him, and like when you see an actor do that, like you try to bring them back. And there's a lot of people in there, and I'm like, make eye contact with me, buddy. Like, like I need you to look at me so I can tell you you're cool. Like, you're okay. And he wouldn't look at me, and he was out. I mean, I was almost like, I gotta stop this. But it was okay, and like Matt kept working with them, and like it. And finally, somehow, I mean, I looked at him and I was like, it's going well. Like, it's okay. Because I think actors often interpret all those notes as, like, they're doing it wrong. Because they don't get notes on a ton of shows. And this was a lot of notes.
But of course, notes on Mad Men mean there's something about what you're doing that I love, and now I just want to see if you can do this or that, or I need you to do it this way. But he wouldn't keep working with you if you didn't.
No.
There wasn't something there.
But he eventually got himself together and did it. And did what he asked for. And we were in that room probably 40 minutes with him.
Oh yeah, we
Oh,
had many
yeah,
auditions
many.
that would go. That's why people had to wait in the hallway a lot.
And then he walked out, and I was like, you were amazing. It's all good. But I mean, I think he did not expect to get that part, but he did. He did. And he was great.
But he
We've had a
literally
few. We've had a few.
he unraveled and then came back together
Yeah.
in that 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's true. We've told him since then, like, wow, buddy.
Right. And Charlie, if you're watching, we love you.
Yeah, he knows we do.
We've seen him many times since for
Totally.
many other things.
Totally.
We love him.
Yes, of course. Yeah, there's been a few auditions like that, and they got the part.
Yeah, almost always.
Almost always, if they lose it like that, they get it. Matt also has a huge amount, like he's very empathic. So whatever the actors are going through in the room, however nervous they are, like you can feel him sort of engaging in that. And sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's like, whoa, the two of you. Whoa, let's take a breath here. It's a lot of nerves. Yeah.
What advice would you offer to actors in that situation?
Look at the casting director. You know what I mean? Like, they are on your side. Like, they are there to help you. They are there to ground you and to say, like, you're okay. Or say, you know what, can I step out for a sec? That's totally acceptable to say, I need to pull myself together. Can I step out for a second? You know? And they're going to go, yeah, great. Let us know when you're ready. That's acceptable to do. There's no reason to have a panic attack in front of everybody.
And really remember that, I mean, you're not in that room for 40 minutes because we just have a ton of time that we have to waste. I mean, we all have a lot of other actors to see and a lot of other things to do. If they're spending time with you, it's because there's something good about what you're doing. So you always have to hang on to that. That's why you're there.
You know, and it's hard. Actors prepare things, you know, and they're like, I did it this way, and I think these are really good choices. And we always say, make strong choices, and great. And then they come in, and he's like, I'm going to ask you to do something opposite. And they're like, oh, I was not prepared for the opposite. And that happened a lot on the show because they didn't know who they were talking to or what they were doing in any of it. There was no
Right.
premise
And
whatsoever.
you didn't see anything that came before or anything
No.
that was going to happen after. So it's all in a vacuum, and you have to make choices based on that. And you're therefore not always going to make the right choice, but we're there and Matt's there to kind of guide you to that.
We saw so many actors leave that room like, oh, like they just were positive they screwed it up. And often those were the ones that booked it. But not always, but they were often people we brought back in for other parts. You know, it was.
And on Mad Men, we had a wall in our office that by the end of the show was side to side, the whole wall, floor to ceiling, with headshots overlapping. So you could see who they were, but you couldn't actually see the whole headshot. And these were all people that we and Matt had liked over the years and wanted to put on the show. but hadn't been on the show yet. And every episode we would read the script and we would turn to that wall and look and say, you know, who is here? And there were people who we had specifically, I mean, for a year we had two guys up in the corner that said finale. And one of them was in the finale of the show because Matt said a year before or more, I'm gonna have something in the finale for that guy. And sure enough, we brought him in and he booked it.
Yep.
So, you know, but we kept people in mind because there were always so many people who were great, but who didn't book it. And they were great for something else on the show. Matt loved them for the show, but this wasn't the right fit. And we would sit at concept meetings and Matt would say, you know, who's that guy that we saw for that other role? And we would bring up a name from 3 years before.
Laura would bring up a name from 3 years before.
I was going to say, I'm very impressed with your memory.
No, she's like, it's crazy. It's not. I mean, I remember actors, of course, it's what I do, but her memory is not, it's not normal. In a good way.
Job.
In like the best way ever.
It's why I'm a casting director.
But no, I mean, she'd just be like, yeah, we had this conversation, and he was this, and he was wearing a purple shirt. I'm like, all right.
But, you know, Matt would remember who they were and what they had read. And actors would come in and Matt would say, oh, hey, good to see you again. You're from Virginia, right? And he would remember details and he would say, you came in to read, what part was it for? Was it? And he would remember what part it was.
He's so engaged.
Yeah.
He's so engaged.
And so we would use a lot of those people as shorthand. And like, okay, let's try this person for right off the wall, you know?
All right, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got some questions from the audience for you guys.
Okay.
Tammy Taylor would like to know, what was the criteria you looked for when casting all the secretaries in Sterling Cooper's office? I'm referring to the co-stars mostly, those without a story arc.
That they were different from each other.
Yeah.
I mean, we would always want someone who was going to bring some different color, who was going to be specific and not just seem like all the other secretaries.
Yeah, and I think the magic of that was that it gave the show an opportunity for some real comic relief with a lot of those ladies, which I think was never the intention, but because their personalities and their looks were all so different, it really was an opportunity to really use that. And there were some amazingly funny moments because of it that were not in the script that way, you know, that the way the person delivered the line, you were like, oh my God.
Well, and Matt would start feeding people that once they
Yeah.
were cast, you know, he would cast someone that was, you know,
Like Stephanie Drake.
I was just going to bring
right,
up
or
Stephanie
Beth
Drake.
Hall.
Yeah.
They would hit the mark on something, and then he would realize he could give them more and give them more, and he could really see people's strengths, and so the character would grow with the actor.
Blankenship.
I
Oh,
know, my
boy.
Blankenship. May
She was
rest
the
in peace.
best. I know, right? She was the best.
It was a great way to weave humor into the show.
Totally. It was a Karate Kid's mom.
All right, this one comes from Magda. What was the process like of researching the look and feel of 1960s New York, and how did that impact your casting process?
It didn't really.
I mean,
A
a
little.
lot of that was, you know, a lot of that obviously is going to be hair and makeup and wardrobe, and we needed someone who felt, we needed to make sure people didn't feel contemporary.
Which some
But-
people do. Like their speech pattern and is contemporary.
But we would also tell people, you know, don't come in and play the period, because as soon as you play the period, you're playing some kind of like version of a 1960s movie, not the 1960s. And Matt wanted it as natural feeling as possible.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, you know, especially the men on the show, they had to say and do a lot of awful things, you know, that now are very, very socially unacceptable. So getting guys to not judge what they were saying and to just say it, because they didn't know any better then. And if they did, they didn't care. So it was different, you know, it was a different society. So getting them to not judge it and to just say it and deliver it and be natural and like it was like you're paying someone a compliment. And they would all be like, what? And I'm like, don't judge it. We know you're a good guy. Just, this guy's kind of a douche. It's okay.
This one's anonymous. With an 8 oh, but it's fine. With an 8-day time limit, did you ever run out of time casting an episode?
Yeah, sure.
And what'd you do?
I mean, we kept casting while they were shooting.
That happened a couple times.
Couple
certainly.
times. We usually finish, but a couple times we didn't. I don't remember when. I blocked it out.
I mean, I don't think they ever had to reboard because
No,
we
never.
didn't have it cast.
No.
But scripts were surprisingly prompt. We would have them on day one of prep. Not every show was like that.
No.
And we would get to work, and it always seemed to happen.
It does. I mean, that's the thing with TV. You don't have a minute to be like, oh, I'm just not gonna, there's no time to pause and wonder. You just got to get it done. Everyone's like, we're not gonna get it done. I'm like, yeah, we are. We're shooting a TV show. We're definitely gonna get it done.
Every casting director does have that, stress stream of you're in the exam and you have no clothes on.
Yeah.
We all have it of they're shooting and no actors have been cast.
I've never had that, right?
Really?
No. Of course not.
Ari would like to know, how closely did you follow the public reaction to the show? Did it influence your work in any way?
No, I don't think so. What do you think?
I don't think it influenced our work.
It was so much about Matt that it wasn't we were just trying to do it right. We were just trying to do a service to the stories we were telling. So I think the public reaction was amazing and certainly validated all those years where nobody knew what the show was. But, that's just like gravy.
But every once in a while you'd read an article about how there were so many 90s movie stars or 90s TV stars.
Yeah.
And we'd think, well, they still need to work and they're still good actors and it wouldn't stop us, and didn't right on through the end. That was for some reason, and I never understood it, because if you look at any TV show, it's like that. There's people from time gone by that are still working.
Well, yeah.
So
I mean,
it's
I don't
a
know.
very strange thing.
It's a lot of it has to do with the taste of the person that whose show it is.
It's true.
Everybody's got their favorites.
There were articles saying that there were too many 90s TV stars in
Not,
the
they
show?
weren't saying too many. It was never negative, but they would point it out, and then it was you have to think about do we need to make an adjustment? Then it was no, I think we're okay.
Yeah.
So odd. Oh, interesting.
People really analyze the show.
Yeah, people really analyze
really,
the show. They
really
analyze.
They really do. So you at a certain point you can't. You just
Right.
have to go, okay, that's your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, at least now everyone knows that Don is not D.B. Cooper.
Right. I never understood that theory.
No.
No, neither did
no.
Were there other crazy theories you guys heard that you were just that doesn't make any sense? to
I
me?
didn't pay attention to a lot of it.
Well, there was the Megan.
Oh, the Megan one was good, yeah,
with
yeah.
the star, the T-shirt with the star, the Sharon.
Like the
Tate.
Sharon Tate thing.
Sharon Tate thing.
Yeah.
But no, we didn't pay that much attention.
Anyway, the D.B. Cooper thing was so bizarre to me.
Totally.
Anyway, sorry. Side note. Anyway, moving on. This is from Ross. What's the best thing an actor could do before starting an audition in the room?
In general?
Ross? In general? Yes. I'm going to answer for Ross. In general.
I think preparation is key. I think it gives you will be at least confident walking into that room that you know the words that are supposed to come out of your mouth. And you'll be prepared and hopefully more open to notes and whatever comes your way in those few moments that you have to grab their attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more preparation and also kind of grounding and calmness there is, which is a hard thing to do, the more you can kind of take whatever is thrown your way.
You got to be able to roll with it, because
Yeah.
you never know what all the personalities you're walking into. There could be 2 people in the room, there could be 10. And you just got to be able to take a deep breath and deal with whatever happens in there. And know that you put your best foot forward, that most of the time you're not getting cast has nothing really to do with you.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. And do your homework too on the show if you can. Like you should have watched an episode.
Right.
You should know what it is.
Or even if the show's not on the air, you should. I remember in season 1, the show hadn't premiered, and people would come in not knowing that the show took place in the 1960s.
Or they would come in thinking it was the hippies. And like 1960 was still the 50s. 1962 was still the 50s. Nobody was there yet. So coming in with the headbands and and you were just like, oh, no. This is not, wrong era. But it was hard at first because no one had seen it. But I mean, on any show, if it's on the air, try and check out an episode. And if you haven't, do not tell the showrunner you've never seen it.
Definitely.
Ever. Ever. For real. You'd be surprised. They'll ask you big, oh, did you see this? Just go, yup. Mm-hmm. Please lie.
Your actors lie.
Please lie.
You could say something like, I'm a little behind.
Whatever. Lie. Smile. I love it. It's fine.
Right.
It's fine.
But I think that also it's really important to follow the lead of the people who've invited you into that room.
Yep.
If they want to chat. But at some point they don't want to chat anymore, and then do your work. And if they don't want to chat at all, be ready to do the work right as you walk in the door. You know, every room is different, and some producers want to find out who you are and chat a little bit, and sometimes they're doing it just to make you feel comfortable. And sometimes it's because they really are interested, but they're interested on some level anyway. And then some producers want you to come in and go right into the scene. Some people are going to ask you to do it a second time, and some people aren't. And it doesn't necessarily mean anything either way. You just have to be ready to kind of follow the lead of the casting director, of the producer, of the writer, and not analyze it too much.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What's the hardest part of your job?
Saying no to people.
Yeah. I
I find that harder than she does.
I don't find that hard. No, I also think that we manage a lot of personalities. And I think that can be a very challenging thing. There's a lot of people that you need to make happy. There's a lot of people that you, quote unquote, work for. And on Mad Men, that wasn't as much the case because Matt was really it was Matt's universe. But most other places, like, yeah, we work for the showrunner. They hired us, but the studio is the one that put us up for the job. There's a network that has needs. So there's a lot of personalities and people that need care, and they have to feel like they're the most important person, and that their opinion's being heard, and that it's being translated to all the appropriate people, and that we really need this role to be like this. And then you get the call from the network that they really need the role to be like this, and you're like, uh-huh.
And I mean, mostly we have to filter it all together, and our job is to do what's best for the show.
Yep.
And that means for all of those people.
Yep.
But we have to kind of figure out what that is and how to balance all of that.
How to balance all that and make everyone feel like they're being heard and that it's respectful. And I mean, there is a lot of people skills involved that I think when I was a young casting director was harder to manage. And now that I've been doing it for 1,000 years, it's like, oh, right, a lot of personalities, a lot of people, and just, make them all happy. There's no other way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Too many phone calls if they're unhappy. Oh, my God. It's true.
Did Matt have ultimate say in casting, or did you have
Yes.
Okay, then.
I mean, AMC approved. Lionsgate approved, but I mean, they didn't kick it back. Hardly ever.
Right. And even when they did, it was more in the vein of, so this isn't what we were expecting. Can you tell us what Matt's thinking about this? And then we would explain what Matt's rationale was. And they'd say, okay, we'll give you a call back. And then they'd call back and say, oh, yeah, it's fine. Because they just wanted to understand what was happening, as opposed to, when something wasn't quite what they were thinking.
Mm-hmm.
They understood that Matt has a vision.
They did. They did.
Okay, this comes from Nathaniel. Did casting for AMC, as it was in its infancy of exceptional television, pose any unique challenges?
Well, they don't have casting, at the time they didn't have casting executive in place. Even now, they just have a consultant. But so you're dealing directly with creative executives, not with casting people. And so they don't necessarily know all the actors, and they don't necessarily have that. They know about storytelling and about producing television, but they don't know specifically about actors in the same way that a casting executive at a studio or network does.
And they can be big advocates for us. They can be a very, very helpful part of the process because they do know actors. Casting executives. And so it's whenever we work somewhere where that role doesn't exist, you're sort of like, okay, this will have other challenges.
Right, and sometimes it's
fine.
nice because you have direct access to those people, and you can explain yourself directly, and there's not a middleman, but it also sometimes means that you are...
Well, sometimes it's great because they don't know. And they're just like, great. And you're like, okay, great. You know what I mean? Like sometimes they're just like, I have no opinion. We like you guys. I'm like, great. We should cast this person then.
But other times it's challenging. So, but AMC they were so supportive of the show.
They were really supportive.
And it sounds like it turned around pretty quickly. Like once the show premiered, and it was pretty instantaneously the hit.
Well, I remember being at the end of season 1, and we were at the wrap party, and we weren't picked up for season 2 yet.
Oh.
And we were.
They announced it at the party.
They didn't.
Vlad announced it from up high.
But I remember waiting to see if we.
It wasn't the official pickup.
Right.
But he was like, we're going to do this for many more years. And we were like,
But it was like, what does that mean? But I mean, even just to be wrapped for your whole first season and to not know if you're coming back to do it again is strange. But it happens. It happens more in cable than anywhere else.
yeah. Sometimes you wait a really long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when did we finish Aquarius?
Long time ago.
Yep.
I mean, we finished the pilot in July
Yeah. Yeah. So
last year. So
Well, that leads into my next question. What are you working on next?
we've got
not Aquarius because it's been wrapped a really long time.
No, I mean, Aquarius premieres this week. You guys should watch it. It's good. David Duchovny. Beth and Anthony.
But we do Turn for AMC.
Yep.
And we do Bosch for Amazon. And we're going back to do season 2 shortly.
Couple weeks.
And we have a few other things. We're doing a pilot with Jason Katims right now.
For Hulu.
So for Hulu, yeah. We've worked with Jason a few times.
Oh, we have The Magicians.
Right? Magicians,
Magicians
pilot we
is-
did for Sci-Fi.
Magician and Bosch are both starting in July.
Yeah. So we're busy, you know, lots
we got
of...
12 monkeys.
Right. We're taking over 12 monkeys this year. So it's busy. It's a lot of like short little seasons, you know, that we put together since most of what we do is cable.
It's not on purpose. We would totally do a network television show. Aquarius is network. They just have, it's
Yeah, they're just
doing it
acting
like a cable show.
I was just going to say they're acting like it's a cable show.
Yep.
They're putting it all out at once.
Well, yes, they are.
How did you get started in this business?
You go first.
You go first.
I think so.
When I was right out of college, I worked for Roger Corman, and I was his assistant, and I
Corman fans.
you know, answered his phones, and I opened his mail, and I would go to rough cut screenings and give notes to directors. I was like, you know, I'd been there 2 weeks, and I would give notes on scripts, and I would do everything, but more as a learning process than anything. Everyone knew not to take me too seriously. But I learned at Roger's side, and then there was an amazing guy named Steve Rabiner who worked there and who had a little bit of a background in casting, and who said, casting's what you're good at, that's what you should do. And I didn't even know what a casting director did. And Roger promoted me to be a casting director. And so I cast low-budget movies, and then kind of had to claw my way out of the genre film ghetto, and eventually decided I wanted to get into TV and did that, and lucked into, you know, literally I had done a low-budget pilot for Fox that was kind of experimental, and lucked into the fact that Boston Public was a huge amount of work, much more than anyone anticipated, and the casting directors who were doing it were also doing the practice and had other things on their plate. And a few episodes in, they said, this is too much. We can't give it its due. And at that point, it was the middle of a season, and you're looking for a casting director, so you're going to take a chance on someone young and hungry. And I got that opportunity to do episodic TV, and I've been doing it ever since.
Yep. I was an actor, and I went to NYU, and I got my BFA from NYU, and what else? What did I do? So I did that, and then right out of school, all of my friends going on auditions, agents, the whole thing, and I was like not super pumped about it. Like I just didn't want to do it, and everyone's like, "How come you are not going out?" And I was like, and I couldn't answer them. I was still in acting class, and I didn't really want to do that. So I got an internship at a casting office in New York, and I was there for a year. But about a few months in, and I was at the front desk, and this was back in the days of Polaroids, and I was taking Polaroids and just, doing my job there. And actors were coming in like with suitcases and hanging bags and all this shit that people from the boroughs bring in, and because they can't go back and change from all their auditions, and they don't have a car to put it in. And I looked at them all one day, and out loud I said, "God, I'm so glad that's not me." And the person sitting next to me was Seth Yankowitz, who now is the VP of casting at Fox. And he said, "That's supposed to be you." And I was like, "Yeah, I think I'm done." And that was it. I had a few more casting jobs in New York, and then I started working production, and that brought me to LA. And, independent film production is insane. So I went back into casting after a couple years of that, and my first job back in casting was on Boston Public. And Laura and I have been pretty much working together ever since.
Which I think I figured out the other day is like 15 years.
It's like 15 years. It took a long time. We took a break. I moved back to New York. I had a minute where I had to leave again.
What I refer to as her New York relapse.
I freaked out. I was like I was just like not 100% willing to admit that I lived in LA. So I was like, I'm going back. But before I did that, Laura left Boston Public to do West Wing, and they made me the casting director for the last season of Boston Public. So I was a casting director, and I moved back to New York, and then I was there.
An unemployed casting director.
Stupid. And I came back, and Laura and I partnered, and here we are. So, yeah, I feel like we've been partners like 9 years.
Yeah, it's like 9 or 10, something like that.
Long.
Long.
Longer than I've been married.
Or me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy anniversary.
Longer than I've known my husband.
Oh, yeah.
No. Well, so
No,
around that time.
We see each other more than we
Oh,
see anybody.
Right. We
Yeah.
spend much more time with each other than we do with our families.
Laura and I now have our own separate offices. It's
For the first time in
Ever?
Just like we have a wall that adjoins us, but we yell through the wall a lot. But
I can't imagine that at all.
Yeah.
No.
I'm super quiet.
I see that.
Yeah.
So,
Shy.
It's shy and retiring. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yep.
So last question. I noticed that Laura, you cast yourself in an episode of Time in Life. Was that right?
Well, first of all, I want to say I did not cast myself. Matt asked me, and whereas I would never have said yes to anyone else, I couldn't resist the opportunity to be part of something that, people will still be watching that show in 20 or 30 years. And for my kid to be able to watch that when he's older and see me, and I couldn't resist. But I just want to out Carrie Audino. Carrie also has a cameo that few people know about.
Oh.
Because
I recur.
Yeah, she recurs.
I missed that one.
She is the voice of Don's answering service.
Excellent.
So it's actually much more memorable.
I wouldn't go on camera. Nope.
But
Bravo.
I just was not prepared for that.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, nice casting job.
Thanks.
Yeah, we did okay.
Well, thank you to both of you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone
guys.
for coming. It's been fantastic.